she was like, an 85-year-old lady, and she was actually
Yeah.
getting raped by this, crystal addict dirtbag guy. And she took out the old 32 Smith & Wesson H&R top break. And so
Wow.
she held it right up against the side of his head and started pulling the trigger. There was 5 duds, and then 1 went off.
Hi there, and welcome to Guns Magazine Presents the Guns Podcast US. I'm your host, Brent Wheat, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat about the interesting stuff that makes up the world of shooting. And that's exactly what we're going to do today, and we've got an announcement. But first, a quick word from our great sponsor, EOTech.
Best known for their legendary holographic weapon sights, EOTech is built for speed, precision, and rock-solid reliability. That focus extends across their lineup, including high-performance rifle scopes for tactical use and hunting, plus durable pistol optics for professionals and enthusiasts alike. EOTech also delivers advanced night vision, thermal, and laser systems trusted by military and law enforcement worldwide. To explore the full lineup, visit eotechinc.com.
Well, hi there, Roy. Welcome to the program, as I've already welcomed the audience. And how are we doing today?
I'm still alive, I mean, at my age,
Yeah.
I mean, that I tripped and fell the other day, and I laughed so hard because my doctor said, well, you're an idiot because at your age, when you fall, you don't bounce anymore. You just go thud.
Yeah. Gosh.
I know. That's so funny.
Yeah, but you're still with us. You're not hearing organ music. You don't smell flowers. Life is good. So,
yep.
Hey, I was going to say we got a quick announcement, and don't normally try to toot our own horn too much, but this past weekend, I was at my state writers conference where I spoke on a couple of things, but they, like a lot of writer organizations, have a yearly, it's called Award in Craft. And Roy, I haven't told you this. We not only won second place, we won first place in the Hoosier Outdoor Writers 2026 broadcast contest in the podcast category.
Wow.
We are the bomb, at least according to the Hoosier Outdoor Writers. So, how about
that something? I guess we shouldn't act surprised, huh?
I guess. And I realize it's not like, winning an Emmy or an Oscar or something. It's a state level writers organization, but I've been a longtime member, past president. I'm now the vice president of Hoosier Outdoor Writers, but I've entered the last couple of years and we've always won first place. I didn't say anything last year, but this year people were bouncing me saying, well, can you let somebody else win for a change? And I thought, let's mention it because it is nice to be honored for doing what I think's pretty good work, and certainly appreciate your contributions, Roy. So we're
Sure.
award winners. So,
well, you know what? And it's especially among your peers,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, because that's a tough audience,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, congratulations. I think that's cool.
Yeah. Same to you. So, okay, let's jump in. And this is one of those weeks we've had a lot going on behind the scenes. And we literally, 2 seconds before I hit record, Roy said, well, what are we going to talk about? And we kind of bounced that around. And you had a good idea. And it's one of those, we've covered a lot, but it's one of those things that people always enjoy it. And today we're going to talk about the joys of snubbies, the care, the feeding, the love, the worship, the idolatry of snub-nose revolvers. And we may not cover new ground, or we may take a left turn completely off into a strange new world we've never explored, but we're going to talk about them. And I got to say, okay, Roy, you came up with the topic today. What is it about snub-nose revolvers that you find as a veteran shooter so fascinating?
They're so cute sometimes. I mean, because what prompted gun cute. I know what prompted this is that I got a new gun recently. I'm holding it up, and if you can't see it, it's a 1957 vintage nickel-plated Smith & Wesson I-frame. It's called their Terrier. right?
Yeah.
So they're just little, and they're smaller than a J frame, and they're just elegant little beautifully made guns. This one's in 32 Smith & Wesson long, which of course has a huge following, and they're just irresistible. I mean, it's boy Barbies. Did I just say that out loud?
You said that. And I got to say, though, even though I kind of bounced you about calling it cute, it is cute as a bug's ear. So if you're listening to the podcast, you need to run over to YouTube and take a gander at Roy's new little shooting iron. It's a cute little thing. You just want to grab it, kind of tweak its cylinder and say, "Oh, aren't you cute?"
Well, and the thing is that we didn't invent this because, I'm holding up a Ford, what is it? Fordsworth and Fordham and Wadsworth. I can't have my glasses on, but it's a 1870s, 1880s circa precursor to the snubby. It's a 38 rimfire, very small, round butt, short barreled, and so there was a reason why they always had them. There's a reason why the Colt 31s, but I think they're the 1843s. Maybe somebody correct me in the comments if I am misremembering that. At the time of the gold rush, they were these like little tiny pocket pistols, and they outsold everything. So obviously there's a hole there that they seem to fill, and they still do. And I'm always amazed, because if we talk about snubbies, the comments always just light up.
Yeah, they certainly do. And, you've already raised an interesting topic that I never thought about, is when you go back to the days of the Old West, when you look at, the iconic gun is the Colt Single Action Army. Everybody carried it 5 7/8 or 7-inch, or sometimes the Ned Buntline specials. But when you look at the history and the firearms history, what was everybody actually carrying? They might have a single action, but it was a sawed off to a 1 or 2 inch to some were called sheriff's models, shopkeeper models, and a whole bunch of those small guns you were talking about, because they were so convenient. Every gentleman had something in his boot or in his front pocket. And so I guess the snubby was the unsung hero of the Old West.
As I think it still is today. I mean, a lot of people, when they, like you say, when they think Old West guns, they automatically think, Colt Single Actions, Remington Single Actions, the early break top Smith & Wessons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the market was flooded with British and European small revolvers. And the small bulldogs, and they were $1.50. When a single action was $17, which was a month's wage for a cowboy. And so that's actually what everybody had one of those. And and a lot of the towns said that there was no gun carrying, but of course, like today, people do anyway. And so you don't carry a 7.5-inch Colt Single Action around like that. You buy one of these little, British Bulldog, revolvers, double action revolvers, and tuck that in your pocket. And so they're almost like the unsung heroes of the Old West.
Well, I've always been struck. I really find it fascinating, and I know you do too. We were just talking about some guys in the 20th century in Missouri that we'll talk about one of these days. But I love finding these old cowboy or outlaw stories from the West that you'd never heard of. And, Bad Bill Jones was the terror of Reno, Nevada, or whatever. I'm making it up. But when you see those stories and you start reading about them, and you read about the people that he killed in his outlaw career. And it was funny that a lot of it was over card games. A lot of it was close range stuff. And he produced a pistol from his vest pocket and shot, the victim twice, and he lingered for 2 days or whatever. But there's so many of those stories. And we've not really talked about it, but the shootout at high noon on the street virtually never happened. Again, one of them, the first was in Missouri, but that didn't happen very often. But a lot of times the shootings were over the faro game or the poker game in the saloon, and it involved a little snubby of some kind.
I agree. I have seen Old West guns that actually had the barrel taken off. So, Colt Single Actions, and the barrel was unscrewed. And so, in an effort to make this gun as small as possible, it actually works, for, as you say, if you're shooting across the faro table, but I think it's interesting. The early Remington Derringers, Colt made a single shot, basically 22 Derringer, and it's almost like it's the gun that nobody wants to admit they have and use,
Yeah.
So and I think at many levels snubbies are that way too, because I remember, but I was at a gun sight class years ago, and it was a law enforcement class, so there was the classroom was full of cops, right? And everybody has their full size holster guns, and that's what we're shooting here. And then I was doing something. I was making a presentation about something. I don't remember what it was, but I said, just out of curiosity, who here has a small frame revolver on them right now? And it was like everybody kind of looks at each other, right? And then
and the hands slowly start racing.
And start coming up, because they're afraid it's like, hey, I'm a pistolero and everything. But really, you have a J-frame and you're tucked in your boot or in your pocket. And then, so we went out on the line, and then I asked, would everybody produce what it is you've got? And it was the J-frames. Smith & Wessons were predominant. There was a couple of old Colt Detective Specials. One guy sheepishly admitted that he had a J-frame and a North American Arms little single action, gun.
Yep.
And so it is. It's like it's the gun that nobody wants to admit that they carry. And but I think that they appeal to that some gun is better than none gun, syndrome.
Yep.
I just was reading something in a comment about one of the videos that we did. It was about calibers, and is a 32 good enough? Will a 22 protect you? That was quite popular. And there was a cop that said that a North American Arms 22 saved his life when he pulled it as a backup gun.
Wow.
And
Very
he
cool.
said, yeah, and what he said was, is all these people argue about stopping power and all that other kind of stuff. Was he said, you shoot somebody with something, and that almost always solves whatever the problem is.
Yeah.
And he's right. So I think that's what's cool about snubbies, is the fact that if you get something from 32 up to whatever size 45 Colt, you have an adequate cartridge in a platform that is virtually 100% effective. If you do any maintenance at all on your revolver, it's gonna work, know. And I know too many instances of old ladies take the 32 H&R top break from their bedside table that their husband left there when he died 30 years before, and they pick it up and they shoot a burglar with it. And so
I was going to say, we just had a story like that not too long ago. She had to pull the trigger like 5 or 6 times to get a round that actually went off, but the one that went off took care of the problem. And I'm trying to think who told us that, or
it was
we talked
me.
about it or something.
It was me. Yeah, it was an actual case, and she was like, an 85-year-old lady, and she was actually getting raped by this, crystal addict dirtbag guy, and she was able to get her hand into the drawer next to the bed, and she took out the old 32 Smith & Wesson H&R top break that her husband had bought in like 1921, loaded it with 5 shots and put it in the drawer, and that's where it had sat all these years. And so she held it right up against the side of his head and started pulling the trigger. And
oh my goodness.
I guess it was a 6-shot because there was 5 duds and then 1 went off.
Wow.
Scrambled
that solved the
brains.
problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you know what was funny too? I talked to the investigators who investigated it, and they said that she was completely, what's the right word? Nonplussed by it all. Like, didn't bother her at all. Yeah.
Wow.
Not at all.
Well,
yeah. She went right back to knitting. I mean, it was like, yeah, okay,
Wow.
shit happens.
Amazing. Yeah.
But there was another successful deployment of a snubby revolver.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more interest among younger people. I see it in the
Absolutely.
comments. Yeah, have you noticed that? Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
I think they're sort of timing out on polymer pistols.
Yeah.
I'm also noticing a real move toward the high capacity 1911 platforms. The 2011s and
Yeah.
everybody who are building those nowadays. A lot of that is coming from the weekend competitors. They're realizing that, you know what, man, you have a really crisp single action, and you can shoot that better than your Glock.
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
generally, and so there's a real move toward that. But what that's doing, it seems to be opening the door up now, and they're looking at these other older, more interesting guns. Plus, I think as they get a little bit older, they realize, I want to carry a concealed carry gun, and I don't really want to carry this 2011 or my full size Glock or my, and short of a small pocket auto. What are your options? And so your options are a good quality pocket revolver. And I think it seems like I'm always seeing announcements from Taurus and Smith & Wesson of a new, small frame revolver. Smith & Wesson just announced a new Chief Special,
Yeah.
they're almost constant. I noticed Taurus, I think it was Taurus, just announced a single action, like a full-size looking single action army.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, there's a reason why this stuff stays, and it's because it's interesting. People like them. And I think for older guys like you and I who carried small frame revolvers as policemen, to me, they're reassuring at some level. I mean, it's like when I know the J frame is in my pocket, it's a predictable companion, for lack of a better explanation. It's like, I know. And yes, an auto pistol, I have an LCP Max, I carry it all the time, but way in the back of my brain, teeny tiny bit in the back of my brain, I always worry that it might not work.
Yeah.
It's like, is it going to jam on me for some reason? Or, and it's like, I always, if I've got a small revolver in my pocket, I never, ever, ever, ever think about that at all,
Exactly. So, well, I got to say, and we've talked about it quite a bit, but I'd say it's been about a year and a half since I went, what I'd say full time, the 38 pocket carry. And it has literally gotten to the point that it's like, oh, I have a gun in my pocket, and suddenly I'm in a situation where, it would have been easy not to carry a gun, but I've got one. And if something happens, and it was weird. The other day I was thinking about it. I got surprised by something, and it wasn't really a threat, but had it gone that direction, I was thinking, what would I do? And I thought, well, I've got 5 in the revolver. I got 5 in a speed strip in my pocket. I got 10 rounds. That will truly, it was this overwhelming feeling of, I had it handled. And that to me is the beauty of that pocket carry, the snubby. And it's literally become a part of me. I used to, if I was working in the yard, digging and all that stuff, a lot of times I would have a gun near me, but I wouldn't have it on my person, which isn't really an A answer, but that's what I chose to do. And now I was literally digging some drainage ditches in the backyard when it was raining and trying to get some drainage problems fixed. Had the gun on me. I was dealing with my koi pond that I built in the backyard. Had the gun on me. And it was just, it is such a part of me now that I don't even think about it. When I get up, it goes in my pocket. And before I go to bed, I take it out. And it's just literally, it's like my wedding ring or my watch. It's just something that's with me all the time. And I think the beauty of it is, I always carried a compact 9 a lot, but now the fact that I don't even have to think, grab my gun and go to the store. It's like, I've got a gun on me all the time. And it's the more I do it, the more comfortable I feel with it. And the more I feel even better about, I'm prepared if something really goes sideways. So,
and
I'm an evangelist.
We both know it happens so fast too, because people, it's like you working in your backyard. It's like you hear sirens, You hear the crash of a car out front. You hear something hit your fence. And then now suddenly there's some dirtbag in your backyard,
Exactly.
holding a knife, being chased by the cops, and he just crashed out front. And I think that's the part that people don't understand, how fast these things happen. And that, see, that's somebody reporting.
Yep, and I didn't have my phone on silent. I owe you a case of beer.
That's right. But yeah, people don't understand how fast these things happen. And so
exactly.
I think Daryl Bolke says it well when like a snubby is a get off me gun. I mean, because I'm not going to engage the armed robber in the store.
Yeah.
If he's taking the money and he's getting it and then he leaves, then I'll wave goodbye,
Yep.
I mean, if he decides he's going to hurt somebody, then okay, well, that kind of forces my hand. I'll take whatever action I can. But even then, I mean, 2-3 shots, pretty much 99.9% of the time ends whatever the threat is, and
nobody wants to be shot.
Nobody wants to be shot. Yeah.
And people are conditioned. It's like, oh, I've got a big hole that's bleeding. Maybe I need to go do something else, or at least run away. And that it truly is about 99% of it. I know we practice for that, the really enraged bad guy who's crazy and he keeps coming, but that's generally not what happens. And if he does, well, you got 4 more shots in that little J-frame. So
yeah, I'll never say that it's completely adequate for every situation, but but gosh, I mean, it's a bit like an adjustable wrench. Is a dedicated socket set with snap-on sockets better? Probably yes, more than likely. But if you just need to get this nut off of this bolt and you have an adjustable wrench, well, then chances are pretty good you're going to be able to do it, And so that small frame revolver in your pocket is your adjustable wrench, for that day. And I mean, people always, I just answered a question this morning from a friend of mine, and he said, I'm really worried. I've been carrying this 9mm, some little polymer pocket pistol thing. And he said, I really am more comfortable with a 45. And he sent me a link. He found some 90s era Smith & Wesson. I forget what it was called, like a 45-10. It was when they made the terrible pistols. Remember those with a safety hammer drop on the slide? Their ergonomics was terrible. Their quality control was terrible. And it was like they called it a chief special, I think, even, but it was a 45. Yeah. He said, I'm thinking I see a good one of these on Gunbroker. I was thinking of getting one of those. And I just went, stop, And so I had the conversation with him about, well, actually a good 9mm load is fine. And there's no appreciable difference between them all, which always develops into a fist fight in the comments. So I apologize. So go ahead and fist fight if you want to. But, and so the reality is a 38 special snubby, a 32 Magnum stubby, a 44 special, snubby, like that one I held up, this Charter Arms 45 Colt. I mean, that should put anybody's mind at ease. If you insist that that's what you need, well, then here's one, So get the flavor that you like in the caliber you like, but really, a 38 special with a good ammunition that would just really do just about, then learn how to shoot the darn thing,
And that's the key. And that's, I got to add our disclaimer. Like you said, Roy, there will be some kind of fist fight in the comments, but our theory is carry what you want, use what you want, just be able to shoot the darn thing. And we're just saying in this case, having something in your pocket is a heck of a lot better than having a custom 1911 with a TV set on top and a laser range designator and a wind speed and humidity detector setting on your bedside table because it's too big and bulky to carry. So that's what we're trying to say, kids.
And again, we've talked about this before, and I'm going to go on record and say this, is that people almost always say, well, like I've made some videos shooting small frame guns like this out to 25, 50, even 100 yards. And people say, oh, well, that's stupid. They're not made for that. You should only they're made for just up close. Or else other people say, they're not accurate. That's why I'll never carry one. And generally when you ask about it, because they'll say, well, mine is so inaccurate, it'll shoot 10-inch groups at 7 yards. And I mean, I'm sorry, there is no snubby revolver that will shoot that poorly. There isn't any. If they had no rifling in the barrel, they would shoot better than that. So it's operator error across the board virtually every single time. And I think if you have a small frame revolver and you challenge yourself to learn how to shoot it well, to where you're shooting decent groups at 10 yards or 15 yards, that's very rewarding, and it also gives you confidence in the gun to be able to shoot more accurately when the situation is more fluid, shall we say, right? Because if you're shooting if you're shooting teacup size groups at 10 yards, taking your time, now when your heart's thumping and your things are happening, and that group now becomes a foot, dispersion, well, that you're still going to be effective, as opposed to if you start out being a foot and now introduce the stress, now that becomes 3 feet, and suddenly you're missing the target.
Well, I got to say that it's painful to understand, but one of the things I see periodically in comments is people get really upset when we say it's the shooter, not the gun. And I completely and utterly agree with Roy that if you take that gun that just won't shoot and you put it in a ransom rest, you're going to be really embarrassed, because suddenly you'll find out that it does shoot. And it's, as we always say, the loose nut behind the gun. There's very few people that can shoot up to the level of accuracy of their firearm. And we need, for those of us who think, no, it's the gun, it's not me. What's that old saying? It's the poor carpenter that blames his tools. Well, it's the same thing with a pistolero. If you think it's the gun's fault, you're going to have to work long and hard to prove to me that it really is the pistol's fault. And that's why I always say, instead of buying great accessories and big new toys and a new gun, invest in ammo. That's when you're going to start turning heads, when people are going, man, that guy can shoot. And
well, you're right.
That's what it's all about.
I did a video on a Model 12, a 2-inch Model 12. So that's a round butt K-frame size gun, lightweight, in 38 Special. It's a marvelous little, small frame gun, or snubby. And so I shot it with Black Hills target wad cutters at, I think I was shooting at 15 yards. And we did very casually. I showed the gun. We talked about it a little bit. It's a good gun. I shoot it well. I shot a group. The group was maybe teacup size, and it always amazes me when the comments are full of like, holy crap, man, I can't believe how you shot that gun. It's like, mine doesn't shoot like that, and it's like, well, actually, it could shoot like that. Exactly. So I don't know. I mean, if you were broken down somewhere and you needed a wrench for something, and I was driving by and I said, well, I don't have a snap-on socket set, but I have this $4 Harbor Freight adjustable wrench. I mean, I know people, there are people in the gun world that would look at that and say, no, thank you. I am only going to use a snap-on wrench, rather than saying, okay, well, this is a tool at hand. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll put this tool to use. And so I think snubbies are that way. If all you can afford is a Charter Arms, basic, Charter Arms undercover 38 Special, you find one on sale for $275 or something. Well, you know what? Just go ahead. And if that's what, buy one. And as Brent says, then you buy a bunch of ammo or a Lee reloading set and learn to shoot it. And it will become a lifetime companion. It really will. I mean, I've got a J frame that I've probably carried on and off for 50 years. So.
Well, okay, I got to laugh. Didn't Charter Arms have the Undercoverette? That's about my favorite snubby name ever, if not gun name ever.
Well, I actually have one, and So they're a little undercover, but it's in 32 Magnum. I like it because it holds 6 shots as opposed to 5 shots. And so I got one. It weighs 13 ounces. I mean, you really literally, if it's in your pocket, you don't even know it. It's like you go around, you look for your gun, and then you realize, oh, wait, it's in my pocket already, So, and so I did the first one. I smoothed it up and showed it to my wife, Susie, and she just looked at me and she said, thanks. And so she took that one. And I had to get another one, and I actually bought one at retail at Brandon's, and then
you
did that one.
You bought one at retail?
I know. Don't tell anybody. I'll never admit that in public, but I did. But I mean, that is actually my go-to snubby these days. Mm-hmm. And I have a Ruger LCP Max that's always in my pocket. But if I have my vest on, just like a regular carry vest, I generally have that little Charter Arms in a pocket holster on the left inside pocket of the vest. Because think about this. Now you're driving your car, you really can't get your pocket gun out,
right.
I mean, without a lot of shenanigans. And unbuckle your seatbelt, straighten your leg out. By then you're dead. So if you drive and you have a pocket gun, wear a lightweight vest, and then that has an inside
Makes
pocket.
Sense.
And then that way you can just reach across your inside pocket, and now you can go to work if you have to. Plus, it gives you not one, but what? 2 guns.
2. Exactly. And I will say, I've same thing. I've realized you cannot get your gun out. So that's why I have the way my vehicle is set up, I can have a full-size gun right next to me. And that's even quicker than presenting a gun. It's right there. So that's a good point to talk about. Well, good stuff. We've reached our time limit, but I'm going to offer a challenge to the audience. We get a lot of comments. We read the comments. We find them very interesting, and it's fun even sometimes when folks argue back and forth, providing it's kept civil and respectful. What I want this week is I want to see comments from folks supporting snubbies and pocket guns. And we get some of those, and then we'll get you people. I want to see what our audience says about why they carry or want to carry or have carried in the past a snubby, especially a pocket gun or a vest gun, something like that. And I want to hear people talk about their experience. And I'd certainly like to hear if you had a failure, but I'd also like to hear successes if you can talk about that. So I think that'll be interesting. If you're on YouTube, leave us a comment. Tell us, let's everybody maybe change sides this week and talk about why you think it's a good idea. And if you're listening on audio podcast, you can always reach out, editor@gunspodcast.us. So, Roy, any final thoughts before we tip on out of here in the award-winning program that we are?
I think if you have a small frame revolver or 2 and you haven't shot it in a while, get it out and dust it off, blow the dust buffaloes out, and and think about what it is, and think about how you would apply it, and see if it actually can become a part of whatever your concealed carry, idea is. Literally about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there's a sheriff near me here, and we're friends, and he brought a Model 60, so it's a J-frame 38 that he's carried for about 30 years. And so he brought it over and he said, it's like a little rough, can you look at it for me? And I said, sure. And it was just like this terrible, filthy,
a little rough.
It was a little rough, right? And I pulled the action, and you can hardly pull it through. And I said, why don't you leave it with me? And I have pictures. I took it apart, and it was literally packed full of dust and grit and crap that had hardened, to where there was a little area where the hammer could move and a little area where the trigger could move and stuff. It was hysterical. I'll send you the pictures after we're done. And so I cleaned it all out and lubed it up and, put it all back together and cleaned the cylinder off, and it made a huge difference. So when he picked it up, his eyes just lit up, and he said, I showed him the pictures. He said, wow, He said, I'm a little embarrassed by that. And I said, yeah, you should be, but it was a real testimony, it was a real testimony to the breed. And he admitted to me, he says, I've gone in the river several times with this on. In an ankle holster. And he said, and I've never had it apart, never cleaned the inside. He said that he's never even lubed it, lubed the inside. Pete, you can cock the hammer, like squirt a little oil down in there every once in a while. But he said, no, I've never done that, so I know, but the darn thing still works. So if you have one, get out, shoot it, trust it, have some fun.
Exactly. And one quick thing I wanted to say, can you see me, Roy? That's the Guns Podcast t-shirt I'm wearing. I thought I'd throw that in. You can go to gunspodcast.us and order them. But first, here's a quick word from our great sponsor, EOTech.
To explore the full lineup, visit eotechinc.com.
Well, thanks for joining us here on Guns Podcast US, brought to you by gunsmagazine.com and EOTech. We've enjoyed talking to you, and we always want to hear what you folks have to say, because we've got a great and growing audience that knows a lot about guns, or even if you know a little, we're still interested in your questions and all that. So anyway, let's get out of here. I got some turkeys to go shoot at some point, so we'll be talking about that pretty soon. But anyway, on behalf of Roy Huntington, my co-host, I'm Brent Wheat, reminding you once again, it's time to get out there and get shooting.